If you are someone who struggles in your career, whether it's performance related or just choosing the right career, then today's video is for you because this is a hot topic in our community. I hear about it all the time from viewers and readers, my clients, and I've also dealt with it myself. So I'm going to share two perspectives from two different readers in the community, one at the start of their career and one who's making a transition 20 years in, and I hope that this video is going to be very enlightening if you are someone who has a tendency to job hop or career hop or wonder if you're just doing the right thing or the thing that you were meant to do. So let's kick this off with a comment I recently got here on YouTube. I'll paraphrase this because it is a bit long, but basically the reader is saying that they chose a career in software development before they knew they had ADHD. But that was 8 years ago, and while they've learned a lot about the act of programming, they realize that it doesn't excite them, and they now realize it will never give them that dopamine boost that they know their brain needs. So the question is, do they continue on that career path, even though they haven't finished their degree and they have student loans? Or do they switch to something else that actually does provide the dopamine boost that their ADHD brain truly craves? Now, there is a ton of things that we can unpack in this one question. It's a really meaty topic, but I'm going to start with the biggest takeaway first. If you let your ADHD brain, a brain that constantly craves novelty because of low dopamine levels, if you let that brain drive your career, what do you think is going to happen? Well, I will tell you based on logic and personal experience. If you let the craving for novelty drive your career, then you will always end up exactly where you are right now, because novelty, by definition, is not static. Things are novel and new until they are no longer novel and new. So if you decide to do that, you're going to spend your entire life chasing novelty, and you're never going to get very far in any one direction because there's always going to be a big, better, brighter, newer thing just ahead. We don't just do this in careers. We also do this in relationships, the things that we buy, our general interests. This is a real problem for ADHDers, and it's the primary reason why a lot of us say, I don't know why I'm not reaching my potential. It's because you're chasing the wrong thing, which is novelty. And if you're constantly in that mode of chasing, you are never going to feel the beauty of contentment. Like things are enough as they are. They're not perfect, but they are what they are, and you can get the most out of it. When you think about it, in days gone by, we didn't have all of the choice that we have today. But the downside of that is, first of all, we're never taking the time to truly understand what our interests and strengths and proclivities and needs are. Instead, we're looking outward at what everybody else is doing and thinking, well, that looks pretty cool. I think I want that, until we chase it and it's no longer novel and new. So we're off to the races with the next shiny, sparkly thing. So coming back to the reader's question about whether they should stick with their current course of action or move on to something that will satisfy their dopamine needs. Here's what I would say to that. The reader did say that they could probably force themselves to finish their degree and then force themselves to go into a career in web development. I'm never going to be the one to advocate you forcing yourself to do things you don't want to do, especially when there's no good outcome at the end of it. But what I'm hearing from this person is that they're close to finishing their degree. They've invested a lot in that degree, and they do feel that they have the energy and skills and resources to finish the degree. In this specific situation, I would absolutely support this person pushing through and finishing their degree for a couple of reasons. First of all, even though these days having a degree is not the end-all be-all, it does signal to an employer that you can start something that's very self-directed and finish it. More importantly, it signals to yourself that you can start something and finish it. ADHDers are infamous for being so hard on themselves for starting things and not finishing them. So in this case, I think this would be a really good practice in developing self-confidence that you are someone that can follow through on the things that you start. Now, do I think they should force themselves into a career that doesn't excite them? Absolutely not. But here's the thing. I find that most people coming out of school to start their careers, and this was true of me too, go to school with the intention of becoming a thing, a label, right? But just because you train for a certain thing doesn't mean you are going to be that thing now or in the future, because you are not a job title. So I really think it's important to underscore that your education and your job title determines nothing other than what pays you from one week to the next. I did my undergrad in psychology, and I remember one of my professors saying at the time, a buck in a psychology degree will get you a cup of coffee. And of course, it won't even get you that these days. Now, that is obviously different with a computer science degree, which gives you real life practical skills in a very specific domain. But does that mean you have to be a web developer? Absolutely not. I challenge you to think much broader than you clicking away at a computer in a cubicle or whatever you imagine a web developer to be. Now, I am not a career counselor, but I am somebody who spent the majority of their career in tech. And I can tell you with confidence that with that kind of skill set, if you don't want to be a web developer, there's a ton of different career paths where having that skill is going to make you incredibly invaluable. It's going to give you the ability to move around in your career a lot more, with that being your core skill. And that's only if you want to work in corporate. You can also do a startup or create an app or be an entrepreneur or be a freelancer. There's a million different directions that you can take that highly valuable skill. So in your case, absolutely, I would finish that degree. And if you're still on the fence about doing it, one thing you might want to consider doing is projecting yourself 5 or 10 years down the line. Let's say you're in between jobs, you're trying to find a new job. And when you're going through that process, will that future self be grateful that you have a degree to add to your portfolio of skills, or do you think it's not going to matter? I don't know the answer to that, but I would encourage you to think about it. There's a bunch of different tangential careers that you could pursue and be very competitive in with this skill set, but you have to understand what your strengths are, what your natural interests are, and the themes in your life that stay consistent over time. So we know that our brains are very novelty driven and our interests ebb and flow like this, right? But there's always a few core things that are consistently true for us. So knowing those inherent strengths is going to be really important. I would also recommend doing the Myers-Briggs test. There's a free version. I think it's called 19 personalities or 18 personalities. Just Google free Myers-Briggs test and go through the questionnaire, and it will give you a really good reflection of who you are as a person. I also recommend doing a values assessment, and I'll leave a link to one below. It's free. And that in of itself is going to help you understand what's truly important to you. And when you know what's most important to you, it acts as a compass or a guide in terms of making choices in your life. I want you to take as much time as you can to get really curious about who you are, what lights you up, what interests you, and think about times in your life when you were at your happiest. It doesn't even have to be work related, but if you can think about periods in your life when you just felt whole and complete, write down all of the circumstances that led to that feeling, because there's nuggets of wisdom in there. You'll find that maybe it was because you were in a more structured environment or a less structured environment. Maybe it was because you were around a lot of people or you had more time to yourself. These are the things you need to know to go after a career that matches your inclinations, preferences, and curiosities. If you use them to direct your career choices, you're going to have a much easier and more satisfying career overall than if you chase novelty, because this is just a rat race. You are never going to catch this, and you're never going to feel satisfied, and you're going to get exhausted and burned out a lot. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. If you have ADHD, you are like an orchid. Neurotypicals, they can thrive and survive anywhere, but you need the right soil and water and exposure to sunlight in order to be your beautiful orchid self. So I want you to think about yourself in that context, so that if you're always finding the right soil, light, and water, you're going to be your best, as opposed to chasing this new and novel thing, which will never get you anywhere. Now, to underscore all of this and put some more color on it, I want to read to you a message I got from a reader who is much further on in her career, but is dealing with the same thing. So here's what she writes. Hi, Karen. My issue is transitioning from an employee mindset to an entrepreneur mindset at age 47. I have experienced burnout many times and now leaving a nursing career of 20 years to start a career that truly works for me and not against me. However, I'm finding it hard to focus and make progress on my ideas. I start one thing and then I get another idea and then I go on with that. So my progress is slow and I can be very scattered in my thinking. I don't know about you, but I can definitely relate to the struggle that she's having. And fundamentally, she is dealing with the same issue that first reader was talking about, this compulsion to constantly go from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. And that, again, is the novelty seeking part of our brain that we have to learn to manage, or it will constantly drive us to places we don't want to go. So what do we do about all of this? Well, in terms of our career, alongside building, regular career skills in terms of any direction you go in, there's a set of soft skills that I think every ADHDer really needs to prioritize. And number one is self-awareness. And you're doing that right now by watching this video. You're really starting to understand that you have this novelty-seeking brain that if you can't rein it in, it's going to take you everywhere. So knowing that is job number one, but also reminding yourself of it whenever you have these moments where you want to drop something and move to the next. Be aware that that is just an emotional state and it doesn't necessarily have to be something you have to follow through on. Our brains have a lot of itches, and if you intend to scratch every itch, you're never going to get anywhere. So the second skill on top of self-awareness is self-discernment, where you're not only aware that this is happening, but you have that skill to realize that in some cases, it makes sense to stay, and in some cases, it makes sense to go. So in the case of the first reader, it probably makes sense for him to finish his degree because it's going to serve him in the long term. Now, in the case of the second reader, she's made the choice already that she's leaving a 20-year career to do something she loves, but she's having trouble jumping from idea to idea to idea. So in her case, I suspect there's a couple of different things going on here. There's probably a lack of clarity around where she wants to go and what her goal is. And she may have a general idea of the business she wants to start, but if she's bouncing around, then she's really in that experimental stage, which is an important stage to be in, but very often we can get stuck there and never actually take action on anything. Another thing that might be getting in her way is her own self-confidence. She may not believe she can do what it is she wants to do, or her brain might interpret that as being dangerous. So it might be self-sabotaging her. And I will link to a video where I talk about this specific thing and how to move past it. So at the end of the day, I would say to this person who's struggling to get started on what she wants to do, make sure you're clear on the end goal and have a plan, get yourself support, whether that's a group or a coach or something like that, because we do really well when we have a lot of structure. So if you've left a career that's highly structured like nursing, and all of a sudden you need to build it for yourself, that takes a lot of skill in and of itself. So be patient with yourself, but make sure that you have the support that you need. And I will link to a video up here that specifically addresses entrepreneurship for ADHDers. But to move forward with this, the one other thing that I think is going to be important for both the nurse moving into her entrepreneurial career and for that person starting their career, you have to find meaning and importance in whatever it is you do. And I know some of you are going to comment and say, but I don't know what my meaning is. It doesn't happen like by the time you're 20 years old. It can take till your 50s, like it did for me. So the process, if you want to accelerate it, is taking it seriously, self-awareness, self-discernment, asking yourself, do I really need to do something new, or do I really just need to resparkleize what I'm doing and always choose something that has meaning for you? There's no such thing as a meaningless job, because if it was meaningless, no one would pay you out of their bottom line to do it. So there's meaning in every job, but it has to be important to you too, right? So on that note, I know I've talked a long time. I'm going to leave links to all of the resources below, so go check those out. And for those of you who have found meaning in your work, I want you to leave a comment below. How did you find it? Because I know a lot of us have figured it out and a lot of us are still searching, and those that are still searching could really use our insights and stories to encourage them forward. So I hope this was helpful, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.